Hey everybody, it's Fox with FoxeoGames, and this is a Fox Thoughts, and today we're talking about not a game. Now this is a phrase that we hear a lot nowadays, and usually it's used in a pejorative sense, or at least it's seen or sort of perceived as being used in a pejorative sense. That is to say, when someone says that something is not a game, the typical reaction from people who like that product is to defend it, to either get offended by it, or at least to defend it, to say, okay, here are the reasons why it's a game. You just don't think it's a game because you don't like it personally. Well, I wanted to talk about this topic of not a game and why I don't think it necessarily carries any negative connotation. First off, the first and biggest, most important point I want to mention, not everything is a game. Not everything is a video game. Of course, we know that. Everyone agrees with that. A hamburger is not a video game, right? There are lots of things that aren't video games. I would say a car is not a video game. I would say a computer monitor itself is not a video game, though it can be used to display one. A lamp is not a video game. There are all sorts of things that aren't video games. Books and movies are not video games. So if someone says, hey, have you read this latest book? I think it's awesome. It's my favorite book. And someone says, hey, that's not a video game. Then the fan of that book would probably just say, yeah, of course, it's not a video game. Right. We know that. There would be no offense. No one would be offended. No one would defend the book against the claim that it's not a game. If someone pulls up Netflix on their PlayStation 4, Xbox One, their computer, their Wii, or whatever, if someone pulls up Netflix and is watching a movie and someone walks in and says, hey, that's not a video game, I don't think anybody in the room would try to defend that and go, oh, yes, it is. It's a video game because it's being played on a console. Of course, consoles can do other things. Computers can do other things. Devices intended for gaming have for a long time now done other things. They played music, which are not video games, although music can be in video games. They play movies and videos, which are not video games. They can show pictures and photos, which are not video games. And you can go online and stream any of the above, which are not video games. And you can also use them for visual novels. And this is where some of you will start to now disagree with me. I would argue, and I think I've got a valid basis for this, that a visual novel is not a video game. Granted, it's sort of classified as one for convenience purposes. It's sold as one. You can buy it on Steam. You can buy it on the PlayStation Network. You can probably buy it on Xbox Live. But the reason I don't think it's a video game is because an interactive novel has never been considered a video game in the past. I mean, granted, a Choose Your Own Adventure didn't have an actual video. It was just a book and you skip from one page to the next. I don't know if they do those anymore, but I used to read Choose Your Own Adventures. But a visual novel is a sort of choose your own adventure. There's very little interactivity. And even though it's a digital video medium, that does not necessarily equate it to a video game. Netflix is a digital video medium that is interactive. You could type stuff into it and stuff comes up in the search box. You can click things and bring up other menus and they respond to you. Granted, a smart refrigerator is a digital interactive medium with a video screen. You can click the things on the touch screen. Some of them even connect to the internet. A microwave is an interactive medium that shows you a display, although we could argue that's not a screen, but just an LED display. There are many car radios that can show videos. You can pop DVDs in them. They have touch screens that are interactive, but it's not a video game. I don't think anyone would argue that a car stereo is a video game. Or how about, the old little Simon Says toy where you hit the big colored blocks? That's a digital interactive medium, but it doesn't have a screen. You see, one of the most important things about video game is that it must produce some sort of video. I think even a text-based game is using a video screen and showing you something on that screen. So, in my opinion, that would qualify under the term video. However, anything that doesn't have a video screen or doesn't show you something on a screen, I think is automatically disqualified from the term video game. So we've got that. So if you're running around playing tag or playing hide and seek with your friends, it's not a video game. Now, if there's a video game in which you launch it on a console or computer or whatever, a character runs around on the screen, you control that character, and you're meant to tag other characters on the screen. As simple as that is, that's a video game. It's got the video showing there. There's some sort of success or failure state, or at least a state in which you're more successful than other states or states that produce different results from other states. And you can control something on the screen, so there's an argument for the most critical factor in a video game other than the fact that it produces a video. has gameplay. There are two words in the term video game. Video, which we covered, and game. And I think the most important part of game is gameplay. Of course, the argument always comes up. What qualifies as gameplay? Now this is where I'm going to bring up the topic of ambiguity. And one of the things I've argued many times on my live streams and on Twitter and whatnot is the presence of ambiguity in certain situations does not mean that everything is ambiguous. What I mean to say is, just because some situations are ambiguous doesn't mean that all situations are ambiguous. So, let's say you've got a visual novel which branches off and does a few other things more than just selecting paths to take in this visual novel. So people argue, well, does that qualify as gameplay? It does this, this, and this, a little bit more than your average visual novel. And my response would be, well, my argument is this. Another guy may say, well, my argument is it isn't or it is. My argument is it isn't or it is. We would each present arguments, and there may be a certain degree of ambiguity there. It may ride the fence. It may ride the line. So what a lot of people like to say is, well, see, we can't clearly define what gameplay is, therefore everything's a video game? Of course not. Just because there's some ambiguity does not mean that all situations naturally become ambiguous. Just because we can't 100% define whether this thing is a video game doesn't mean that every other thing can therefore be a video game by default. There are certain things that are clearly not a game. And for me, a standard visual novel where all you do is select choices where you continue to push through basically the novel is not a game. Furthermore, something like Proteus, where all you do is move around and watch as, the landscape shows up, is not a video game. Just the movement alone, to me, is not a game, because we used to have back in the day, back when Windows was really early on and video was a thing, they even had these few little programs where you could sort of virtually move through a museum and you would go different directions and you could see stuff in the museum. That's like Proteus. But no one considered one of those virtual museums a video game. It was never a consideration. No one thought it was. No one would have even argued that it was. So I think one of the most important things to do is, first of all, don't be offended if someone says something is not a game. Even if you think it is, just give your argument for why you think it is. First of all, it's got to produce video. It's got to be some sort of screen that shows video of something happening. Secondly, there has to be gameplay. And like I said, there is some ambiguity there. But the presence of some ambiguity does not mean that all things have ambiguity. Dark Souls is clearly a video game. Fallout 4 is clearly a video game, But Netflix is clearly not a video game, even though there's interactivity. So, there are people out there who say, well, any digital medium is a video game. Any digital interactive medium is a video game. Well, definitely not. Definitely not. There are tons of digital interactive devices that no one would consider a video game. A controller by itself is a digital interactive device, even with analog included, but it is not by itself a video game. It's simply used to play video games or even navigate Netflix. But the controller in and of itself is not a video game. You could even argue that a speaker could be a digital interactive medium if it has buttons or options on it, if it's not purely analog. But of course, a speaker system by itself is not a video game. A camera, my digital camera has a screen on it. You can navigate through the menus, push buttons, and it responds to you when you push those buttons. It's interactive, in a sense. But no one would argue that a digital video camera is a video game. And in that sense, the reason I bring this up, someone may ask, well, why does it matter, Fox? Why does it matter what is or isn't a video game? Because if anything is a video game, then really nothing is a video game. If anything can be a video game, then, well, we can see video game stores and outlets just carrying anything and everything. It could water down the whole classification to the point where anything that's interactive in any possible way is suddenly now a video game. And it will drown out other better products with these other products popping up. Visual novels are fine. You want to sell them at video game stores? Fine. You want to sell them on video game consoles and on Steam and whatnot? That's fine. But I think we need to be clear about classifications here. It is meaningless to say that something is a video game if there's no clear-cut definition of what's not a video game. Or at least there's no clear-cut not a video game classification as well. With any classification, there's also the opposite end of that, the not this thing. If something can be this classification, it is also therefore, there are also therefore things that are not this classification. A book, a novel, is not a movie is not a novel. A movie can be based on a novel can be based on a movie, a novel can have pictures in it, but it's not a movie. A movie can have text in it, be based on a novel, have characters, have exposition, but it's not a book. And no one would argue that, and no one would get upset about it. So I think the most important thing is, don't get upset when someone says something's not a game. Don't get offended. But if you are insistent that it is a game, then provide your arguments. And like I said before, there will be some cases where we simply can't agree. Proteus, I think, is a perfect example. I would clearly consider Proteus not a video game. There really is no gameplay whatsoever. Movement alone in a digital well, I don't even think there's really interactivity. There's just a digital video medium in which there's movement. But other people will claim, hey, you can move around, therefore it's interactive. You push forward, you move forward. There's video being displayed, graphics, it's a video game. I get that argument. I disagree with it, but I get it. Now, can Proteus be sold through video game outlets? Sure. I mean, it runs on the PC. Right? It runs on systems that are considered gaming systems, at least partially gaming systems, so that makes sense. And what I want you guys to do is talk about it in the comment section below. Give some examples, and this is where it'll get interesting. Some examples of things you would consider that are not a video game, things you would consider are borderline maybe video games, maybe not, and things that are clearly games. I think we can mostly agree on things that are clearly games. No one would argue that Dark Souls or Call of Duty is not a video game. But things like Proteus, you know, the vanishing of Ethan Carter. Yeah, some of these things I think we'll have some interesting discussions on. I'm Fox with FoxeoGames, and I'll talk to you next time.